Hey, everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod BBQ podcast. On this episode, I've got Mr. Alan Galbraith on here. Now, Alan, if you don't know Alan, well, let's put it this way. You probably know a lot of the stuff that Alan's done. We're going to talk about shows that he's, played with, curated, and built up, like Billet Proof and Concours de Le Mans, which is one of my favorites. We're going to talk about some crafty old cars, oddballs that we both love, and just the industry in general. Alan, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful day here in Northern California. And speaking of weird cars, I'm getting ready to go out and work on my Corvair. So,
okay. So before we get into all the oddballs that we've owned, how did you? So I want to give people a little backstory. So Alan and I, we've known each other. It's got to be going on 8 to 10 years, something like that.
Yeah.
For a while.
Yep.
And when we first met, we started talking about motorcycles, and we both raced motorcycles back in the 90s and the 2000s. Then we started talking about cars. Then we went on some drives together. We had the most epic track battle in the history of track battles and two of the most oddball cars you've ever seen in your life. But then I realized that Alan also did shows and curated some of the coolest shows. Like aforementioned Billet Proof and now Concours de Lemons. And I wanted to talk about how you got into this. How did your love affair with cars start? How did you get into the show side? And then ultimately saying, you know what, I see there's a need for this stuff. And I think I can curate this and go down this road for the enthusiast.
Sure. I mean, my background in cars starts, it's in my blood, literally. My father was a hot rodder after World War II, was a returning vet and, kind of a car hooligan. And I grew up with that. My earliest memories are at a drag boat race. I mean, that's the kind of things we did. There was always a hot rod or a sports car around. And later on in life, I started going to this fun show called Billet Proof, which was for hot rods that didn't fit into any other shows at the time. I mean, like, Good Guys or Hot August Nights or something like that. They weren't even letting in cars that weren't finished. And as far as I was concerned, a hot rod was, boy, you took the fenders off, you got it running and you went. It didn't matter if it had a top, interior, what. And those kind of cars weren't allowed into shows at one point. Kirk Jones and Jay Ward started Billet Proof, which was a backlash to the kind of billet high-end hot rods of the time. And it was all about 50s and 60s style homemade hot rods, what you could do in your garage instead of what you could do with your checkbook. And that hit a note with me and my father. We started going to this, kind of found our hot rod tribe with these jalopies, right? And I, loved it so much, started talking to the owners, and they were ready to kind of move on and do different things with their lives. And so was I. And I went, maybe I could make something of this, hot rod show thing. Knew nothing about how to put on a show, right?
Really?
I had looked around and went, oh yeah, you rent a fairgrounds and open the doors, and that's kind of the extent of it.
that's a ballsy move.
It was a little bit of a jump. I did have a background in television and film, so I kind of approached it that way. It's like a production or a concert, right? The curtain goes up, the lights turn on, and boy, you better be ready. And that's exactly the right way to approach it. So kind of fell into the rhythm of doing these shows, got to do what I loved, be around the people in the cars that I loved, and just had a good time doing it. Expanded it. It was a kind of a local show, took it nationwide. And along the way, I had always been going to Pebble Beach. The Concours at Pebble Beach, with this love for hot rods and weird cars, I also have a love for the higher end.
Sure.
And had back in my mind, because I'm kind of a snarky jerk, the first time I went to Pebble Beach, I went, I could sneak a Pinto station wagon out on the beach before anybody stopped me, right? And that just kind of sat in the back of my head. And when I figured out how to do car shows after buying Billet Proof, I went, aha, I can do that show I thought about. Instead of featuring Delahaye's and Ferraris, I can feature Pintos and Pacers and Gremlins and let a little bit of air out of that Pebble Beach, which is kind of stuffy, right?
Pebble Beach. I always equate Pebble Beach to the most disgusting display of wealth on the planet, right? When you go down, for those who've never been, Pebble Beach Car Week is held in Monterey, California, in Carmel for 1 week in August. It is, you have the best of the best in everything. It is the best cars, some of the best food, the best people watching in the world.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
But to Alan's point, it's one of those things. It's like you gotta knock them down a little bit, because some people get a little too high on themselves, I think.
Well, and the Concours had fairly humble beginnings. It's always been a nice show, but it was small, and it was kind of, it wasn't that important on the schedule of car shows. And over the years, it had grown to be, it's the Super Bowl of car shows. I mean, it is really the top of the top. And it had gotten, some of the fun had just gone out of it, right?
Yeah,
it was
agreed.
a little stuffy. And, I kind of sensed that a little bit. And like I said, being kind of snarky, I went, this is, I bet there's some Pinto people out there that would love to come by and really, really.
And not, you didn't even try to go like something that wouldn't generally fit in, like, I don't know, a Corvette. You went straight to Pinto.
Oh yeah. we had, the very first year I put this together, I just put word out to friends, and it caught like wildfire. It went out in the automotive blogosphere and media, and I had people from all over, bringing cars, stuff I'd never heard of before. Right. And as a matter of fact, I got a call the very first year from one of the officials at Pebble Beach. It was about a week beforehand. And I, pick up the phone. Hi, and this is so-and-so from the Pebble Beach Concours. I'm like, oh, hey. And she said, so tell me about this Concours de Le Mans. And I'm like, hey, it's in no way making fun of your show, right? Of course it is, right?
Right.
And I explained it, here's what we're going to do. And it's kind of fun and goofy. And we have worst of show, and we have most dangerous car, all this kind of stuff. And there's this silence on the phone, and I'm expecting, well, here's the cease and desist order. Right. And she goes, well, I wish you luck with that. And then I said, before you go, how did you hear about the show? She says, well, I was up at the polo fields where all the transporters are, where they bring in the cars, and someone was unloading their Delahaye. And right behind it, they had a Chrysler. Now, if you're not familiar with a Chrysler, it's an American-made car from the 40s and 50s. It's a tiny little thing. Yeah, Chrysler made, stationary engines for power generators in B-17s. And they said, hey, we can make that. And they also made refrigerators and record players. Next logical step is to make a car.
Obviously, sure.
Yeah. So consequently, they weren't that great, right? And, well, someone was unloading their Delahaye, and right behind it, they had a Chrysler. And I knew that wasn't for my show. So I asked them where it was going, and they said the Concours de Le Mans. So I figured I better check that out. So yeah, it was an instant hit.
Yep.
And it just kind of blossomed from there. It grew every year. We had sponsors that were on board right away, and it has become kind of the antidote to everything that goes on at Monterey Auto Week. It's insanely expensive. The hotel rooms are expensive.
Yep.
Tickets to the events are expensive. We try to keep it free for everybody to come. And it's not about what you can spend. It's about your attitude and having fun. Yeah. And it is just a kind of a breath of levity during this super serious high end. Everyone's trying to profile and wear your fanciest watch and drive your fanciest car. And here we are with, we're just as down market as can be. So,
yeah. And I think that's, one thing that you touched on is it does add levity, right? And the cool part about it is the show doesn't take itself seriously.
No.
Everyone out at the show, whether you're displaying a vehicle, whether you're judging, whether you're walking around the show, is there for one purpose, and it's to have a great time. And it's fun because people get dressed up. People are there to enjoy themselves. They're there to talk to everybody. Yeah. Everybody at that show is 100% approachable. And I think the best part is it is such a family atmosphere. You could bring your kids there. You could bring your parents there. You can bring anybody that you want. And since the cars aren't the best of the best, and we have some of the worst in the worst, right?
Right.
Owners are not afraid to let you go up and touch them, to sit in them, to stand on them, to do whatever. And I think it's almost like a a vehicular carnival ride for the senses when you get there. And it's such a great, it's such a wonderful idea to do that, dude. It's really such a breath of fresh air.
Well, like I said, it was through no genius of mine. It came about because I'm kind of a jerk, and I went, aha, I can make fun of it. Right? And it actually turned into more than that, through no fault of my own. I thought it was just going to be a joke that I'd do a couple of years, and hey, I played the joke, it's over. And what I found was that the folks that show up and bring their cars are just as enthusiastic about them as the people with a Ferrari or a Duesenberg on Sunday at the big Concours, right? They are excited to show their car to people, to tell about it, to tell the history. A lot of cars have family history and great backstories, and you don't have to spend $1 million or $1 billion on a car to have that connection, right? And that's what we found. It quickly turned into something a lot more than we intended, which is awesome. And we get people from all over, all walks of life. We get, like I said, entrants in the big concours. We'll go and find a car to bring to Lemons.
Yeah.
And then you have the people, somebody that has a Studebaker at home, and that's their daily driver, and they bring that, and they're pleased as punch that people want to see it and hear about it. So it's fun. Some of the stories that get shared are phenomenal, and there's always some car that A, I've never heard of, or B, never want to hear of again, because they're just so terrible. I mean, we get really good examples of bad cars. We've had like the most pristine Cadillac Cetera, ever. Right?
Right.
And then we have really bad examples of good cars. We've had just horrific Rolls Royces show up, right?
Yep.
So it spans the whole thing. There's stories that go with these cars. We've had the world's highest mileage DeLorean come and won worst of show one year. It's an 800,000 mile DeLorean.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Under its own power?
Under its own power. Yes. And the folks that drive it raise money for the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's. Perfect. Right? And it's phenomenal. They're great folks. They have a ball with the car, and it brings smiles everywhere they go, and they go everywhere.
See, that's the cool part. And like, here's the thing. It's some of the cars are a little shifty. There's no question about it. But when you see things, we talk about rarity in cars, right? And when you go to Pebble Beach, if you go to the lawn or you go to the Concours or any of the events, you see some of the rarest cars in the world. You will absolutely see some of the rarest cars in the world at Concours de Le Mans, because like when you all of a sudden stop in your tracks because you're seeing the world's most glorious, perfect AMC Eagle wagon or something along those lines, you're like, oh my God. And it's not that it's worth a lot of money, but it's the fact that somebody either restored or has just been the caretaker of this car that's worth $19 for I don't know how long. And they, like, to your point, the same amount of passion, the same amount of love and enthusiasm for that Eagle as they would have for a Delahaye or something like that. Right?
Certainly. Yeah. I'll give you a series of words that you're never going to hear in this order again at anywhere but from the Concours de Le Mans. Over restored Cosworth Vega.
Right.
So we invited the Cosworth Vega Club to come one year, and they were over the moon about it. Enthusiastic, said, we will show up in force. When's the last time you saw a Cosworth Vega, right? They're fairly rare car to start with. They're even rarer now because not a lot of them survived. But the Cosworth Vega Club they're very enthusiastic about their cars. They love the chance to share them. And they kind of got the joke that, hey, I'm going to call it the Cosworthless Vega. They're like, oh no, we get it. Like the best one in the world is worth 20 grand. Yeah, it's right. We get it. Yeah. So they showed up, they, put on a great display, had a great attitude. And then the next day at Pebble Beach, I'm standing there with a couple of judges, and it was a year they were featuring the Alpha 8C. And we're standing in and amongst these cars, probably $100 million worth of cars, sitting there. And the judges were all talking about, hey, did you see those Cosworth Vegas yesterday?
That's so great.
It was great. And I stopped them. I said, whoa, guys, look where we're at. Look around us. They're like, yeah, Alphas. But did you see those Cosworth Vegas? My job's done, man. That's
but here's the thing. It's like, I always equate seeing perfect examples of things like that as everybody started somewhere, right? Very, very few people all of a sudden just instantly owned a Lamborghini, Ferrari, Delahaye, Birdcage, Maserati, something like that, right? Or, 1917 perfect Cadillac or something, something like that. Everybody started somewhere. And I think that one of the things that Lemons does is it brings people back, regardless of how successful they are, regardless if they can afford everything. At some point in their life, they've had an experience with a car like that, because they're still enthusiasts, and they still see these cars. And when they're in such amazing condition, even if they're not in amazing condition, it brings back all those memories from when they were kids and they first started driving, or their first experience back in high school with a car, or whatever the case was.
That's just it. I get some questions, sometimes we get some cars, and it's kind of tough because there's some spectacularly bad cars and some spectacularly rare cars that show up at Lemons. And every now and then someone will bring, here's a 67 VW Bug, right? And people will kind of go, oh, why is that there? And I said, well, watch, stand next to it and watch and listen, because people will go by and go, oh, in college, me and 12 of my buddies, jumped in one of these and we went to a concert and it broke down. We had this great time. Everyone's got a story like that, whether it's the VW Bug or an S10 pickup truck, or, a minivan that shows up. There's some relatable story to that. And not everyone has a Delahaye story, right?
That's right.
That's what we kind of shoot for. It may not be the worst car or the most wacky or that, but it's relatable,
Yeah. Has there ever been a car that you've rejected, or are there cars that are too nice where you're like, you know what, doesn't fit the profile?
We have, we've had some amazing cars, and kind of that didn't fit, right? And I let them in anyway, just to see the reaction for starters, and B, just to get a feel for the owners. We've had a 288 GTO Ferrari that wanted to enter, and I said, that's kind of not our wheelhouse. Right? The guy goes, oh no, I want to put it in the needlessly complex Italian class. And I'm like, you sure? Because we're going to make fun of it, right? And he's like, oh yeah, I get it.
Now that is a $500,000+ car all day long.
Easy. Yeah. But I mean, it has horrible things like you've got to change the bladders in the fuel tanks every couple of years because they rot out. I mean, stupid stuff, right? And it's like perfect for the needlessly complex Italian class. We had a Aston Martin DB5, right? Wow. Which again, beautiful car.
Beautiful car.
And we put it in our Rueful Britannia class, right? And I told the owner, I said, well, what about it? And he says, well, I have a rejection letter from Pebble Beach. I'm like, okay, that's
perfect.
Good enough. And he goes, B, everybody loves these cars, but I've owned this for, decades. And I can tell you, this thing was made in a shed by blokes with cameras, right? I mean, it's not that well made, right? And, he opens up the hood and says, look at that weld. It's horrible, right? It's like, it adds up to something that's very nice, but he's like, deep down, you look at these things, the best car in the world, there's something weird about it. And we can celebrate that. Right. Yeah. So,
and I think I think that goes to the point where, it was interesting. Last year we were down there and we had gone to during Car Week, there were so many different events going on. You've got McCall's, you've got Concours Italiano, you've got the Renless Reunion or Ren Reunion, whatever it is. You've got Lemons, you've got all this stuff. But you have these individuals that a lot of them, like the DB5 owner, have had these cars forever. And I remember we had gone to the Renlist, the Porsche day, and we had pulled in, and I have an older 911, and we parked, and a guy pulled in behind us in a red, like early 70s Ferrari Daytona, right? Now, this is a dirt parking lot. Right. This guy rolled in, parked, and what is that car worth? What is a Daytona worth these days?
I out of my price range is what it is.
So I mean, absurd. Pulls it in the dirt lot. The car is covered in dirt. The guy reaches in the back seat, puts on his straw hat, gets out. The window is still open on the car. I was like, dude, don't you want to shut the window? He's like, he goes, dude, I've owned this car for almost 40 years. He goes, nothing's gonna happen to it. It's fine. And to guys like us, we look at that and we're like, oh my God, to him, it's just a car.
Just an old car. Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of it. You know, we have had cars that are out of place, right?
Mhm.
But it's less about what the car is, which is a lot of the times at these other shows, that's what it's all about, right? It's less about what the car is what the story is behind it and the owner's attitudes, right?
Right.
We had somebody enter, you know, a Lamborghini Gallardo.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what's the gag, right? Tell me what's, you know, what, you know, that doesn't kind of fit. He's like, oh no, I'm going to tell everyone it's a Fiero kit car. And he did all day long. He, you know, was like, anybody that got too close, he'd pull him in. See, here's where I can show you it's a kit car. It wasn't, but he was so convincing that about half the people walked away, go, oh, that's a really good kit car, right? You know? And half the people are like, yeah, I can tell he's BSing, right? But that added to the show, you know? And so as long as you got some little weird bit like that, or a sense of humor about yourself or your car, that's what we're looking for. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I think, and I think that goes to also play with, I mean, your personality. So for those who don't know, Alan and I talk about the weirdest cars because, so here's the thing, like I'm 6'4", like over 240. You're what, 6'5", 6'6"?
I'm 6'7", about 250.
You're 6'7", right? So we gravitate to big cars. We just do. But we gravitate to like the biggest, what I would consider like the greatest cars, like Bill Blass Continentals.
Oh,
and you know, like C-body Mopar, and like the biggest, dumbest thing where everybody would be like, you know, you're not 107 years old. You don't. And meanwhile, Alan and I will totally start geeking out over stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like Alan's gone so far, he had a Munz. He bought a Rolls Royce, which cracked me up. Right.
Yeah.
So what, and like your wife is such a wonderful person. When you talk to her, is she like, you want to buy a what? Like, how do those conversations go? Because Melissa's fantastic. And so, but I want to know, because I know how my conversations go. I'm curious how your conversations go.
Oh, I rarely tell her. Yeah. The cars just show up. Yeah. I think that's the best way to approach that. Right. And she's so immune to it now that, you know, as you know, I'm surfing the internet and I should be working and there's car ads, and you know, I think I bombard her enough with it that, you know, one day I'm looking at Porsches, the next day I'm looking at Munzes, then I'm looking at, you know, 1979 Lincoln Bill Blass, right? And she doesn't see it coming, right? It's guaranteed to be weird. But yeah, those are, you know, I just like something that's a little different, right? I mean, it's a little, you know, it's like you said, I don't fit in a lot of cars. I've been disappointed that I couldn't, you know, I've actually probably saved myself from buying a few cars I shouldn't because I don't fit in them. But that being the case, just love something different, love something you're not going to see every day. Right. And that's not to put those down, but that's just my personality. I like something that stands out, not necessarily because it's overly expensive or you know, refined or anything like that, but just something that's different and exciting and you know, a totally different experience. Right.
So because you've had so many cars over the years, and as an enthusiast, you've also had the opportunity to not only drive but been exposed to so many different ones. Has there been a car? And this is a two-part question. Has there been a car that you've owned or been in that has surprised you, where it's exceeded every expectation you had, and then a car that has just been like, oh, this is just awful, and have just like failed every expectation you had?
The second question's easier to answer.
Okay, shoot.
And the car that probably went right to the bottom, actually made me angry to own, and just was bottom of, you know, didn't meet any expectations, was a Rolls Royce. You know,
really,
it's the finest motor car in the world, right? And granted, I didn't have a very good one, but it's still
it looked good.
Oh, it looked fantastic. They're beautiful cars. I had an 89 Rolls Royce Silver Spur, right? Okay. Granted, probably not the best, you know, era to have.
Sure.
But it was attainable. And, you know, I got this thing, and I'm convinced that an 89 Cadillac is 99% of the experience of the Rolls Royce. All it doesn't have is that little, flying lady on the hood. And it just was awful. I mean, like I said, I had a bad one, but it was horribly over-engineered to go, for instance, the windows, when you hit the window switch, the window doesn't start moving. There's a chain that is on a spring that attaches to the post that pulls the window, so that when the motor starts moving, the chain stretches and the window starts to move slowly and then speeds up and moves up or down, right? Completely over-engineered, completely unneeded. You can just hit the switch and the window goes up and down and nobody knows the difference, right? But this probably added, $2,000 to the expense of the car when they built it, added at least 100 pounds and all the mechanisms and stuff that they had to put in to make this thing work, all for that extra little bit of luxury, right? And it just didn't impress me that, all that extra stuff added up to that much more, right? I mean, I get it, what they're going for, but then 30 years down the road, when you got to maintain all this stuff, oh boy, strap in, right?
So now, having had that experience, right? Do you look at luxury cars the same way anymore? Or were you still like, so take a new Rolls Royce, which is 90% BMW or whatever it is these days, right? Do you look at them and go, oh, this is just ridiculous. I could get this. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. I kind of equate it. We were talking the other day about watches, my wife and I said, what's the best watch in the world? The one that runs consistently forever. And you never have, a $20 Timex is going to last you your lifetime. You're never going to have to service it. You're going to throw a battery at it, as opposed to a Rolex or a Patek or, anything like that they're expensive. You have to service them all the time. If they do break down, it's expensive to fix. Same thing with a luxury car. To me, the most luxurious car is the one that lasts forever, right? And that's what Rolls Royce used to be in the teens and 20s. That's what they were. They were bulletproof, and they got away from that. That's so. Yeah, I don't look at those things the same way. And having had some rather expensive repair bills on luxury cars over the years, boy, that's
it stings. Yeah, man, I get it. I get so what has been something that you've been in or owned that has exceeded your expectations? And it doesn't matter the year, the make, model, but I'm just curious where you've gotten into a car and you've been like, you know what, this kind of blew me away a little bit.
This is, and you and I have an experience in this car, Nissan Juke.
Absolutely. I'll throw it. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's probably one of the weirdest, ugliest looking cars, for a long time. Right. So you look at it and kind of go, what's this frog looking thing?
Yeah.
And it's not spectacular in any way, but Mike and I got into a track battle in a Nissan Juke. And what was it? A Fiat 500.
It was a BRZ. It was a BRZ.
It was a BRZ. Yeah. Got into a track battle in this thing. And I got to tell you, the Nissan Juke can handle.
Yeah. Shockingly so.
Yeah.
This happened when the Juke first came out. It's got to be 6-7 years ago at Laguna Seca.
Yep.
And we went out, and it's interesting because they have these press days down there, and you can go out, and if you know how to drive, they give you a little more free rein. Al and I have been track driving for a million years. And we just went for it. And it was, to this day, after being on a racetrack for 30 years at this point, one of my greatest track experiences ever in two of the slowest cars
I've ever had. Yeah.
It was the greatest thing in the world. And I totally agree with you. It's little surprises like that. And everybody now will look at the Juke and they'll be like, that's such a, like you said, a little frog eye thing. And I'm like, best car ever.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, phenomenal car. Loads of fun. And, had we not gotten that battle, I may not have had that opinion of it, but it was a decent car. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, other things aside with it, I'm sure someone's going to say, oh, they blow up at 40,000 miles or whatever. Right. But it was a shock. It was a surprise. It was a kind of a shock. And that, like the Abarth Fiat 500 is another one.
Yeah.
Just a bucket load of fun. I mean, you gotta drive it like you're riding a motorcycle. You gotta wring its neck, but
Right.
it makes every trip to the grocery store to get milk like you're qualifying in Imola, right? And you're going 40
Right.
miles an hour,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah. So it's those are neat little cars.
So what have you, what do you have in your collection right now? Because I know you've got some, your Corvair, you've got your Mustang, which you've had for a million years, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
I've actually trimmed down a little bit, but
okay.
yeah.
So what do you have? And we could get into motorcycles too, because that's another passion we both share.
Right. Right now I have my two collector cars are cars that I will never sell that I've had just about my whole life. I have a 65 Mustang, A code notchback 4-speed that my dad bought when I was, I think, 6 months old, right? So it's a family car. Years later, I realized this. I said, Dad, you had a brand new baby, right? You go and buy a Mustang.
Yeah.
So what were you thinking? He says, well, I needed something to tow my drag boat with. I'm like,
not answering my question.
yeah. How did you pull that off? Right. I mean, kudos, right?
But well done.
Yeah. And then the other car I still have is I have a 63 Corvair convertible, red, white top, white interior, 4-speed.
Yep.
And again, my dad bought it in 1970 for $350. And I still have the logbook from it, the whole thing. It was bought off an airman back east. It would kept, every time he filled it up, he wrote down, mileage, cost, all this stuff. And Dad bought it for me and said, this is going to be Alan's high school car, right? And years later, again, I realized that's BS. He bought it because he wanted a convertible.
Yeah, of course he did.
On me, right? Yeah. So I get to high school, I've got the Mustang. I didn't, and at that time, the Corvair had been sitting in a barn. I'm like, oh, screw the Corvair. I want the Mustang, right? So I went terrassing around in that. I've sold the Corvair to friends a couple times with, saying, hey, first right of refusal. And it's come back to me. And finally I said, you know what, it's meant to be. I need to tear this thing down. It's, engines out, getting a full rebuild, just redoing it. And I love the Corvairs. The more you think about them, and I'm going to say something that's going to generate a lot of comments. If you had a 1964 Porsche convertible, 4-speed turbo, what would that be worth?
Oh,
I mean, they didn't make it, but if they did,
6-figure car, mid 6-figure car, sure.
You can go get the best one of those in the Corvair for $20,000.
Right.
Yeah. And no, a Corvair is not a Porsche, although they did race against each other in period, did fairly well, right? It's a different experience, but man, you can get pretty close for not a lot of money. And what a daring concept for GM, and designed it in 1959, right? We're going to do a rear engine, aluminum, air cooled car. Where did that come from, right?
And from the driving perspective, it's interesting. We raced one in a Lemons event, a 24 hours Lemons event in Stafford, Connecticut. We raced a 63 4-door. And there's an award that you get called the Index of Effluency Award, which we won. And the car had a top speed of, I think, 68 miles an hour. It was a Power Glide. I think it had
two-speed Power Glide.
Yep,
Yeah.
2-speed Power Glide. It was one of those cars where no one could pass this, because throwing it into a corner meant you were instantly sideways.
Yeah.
Right. And the car was shifting all over the place. But my God, 29 miles to the gallon, foot to the floor the entire time we had it.
Yep.
It didn't miss a beat. It just went the same line every single lap for 2 days straight. And it's all it did. It was a little hamster. It just kept going and going. And so and that was the first time that I had ever had a real experience in a Corvair. After that, I was like, I don't get it. I like yes, it was quirky. Yes, it oversteered like a son of a bitch. But my God, what a fabulous little car.
Yeah, they're great cars, completely underrated. I mean, they were sold as a second or third car. They were an economy car, right?
Right.
And I think they're beyond that, right?
I do too.
It's a neat design. You look at the second generation, and that's Bill Mitchell at his height. I mean, those are sexy cars.
The Corsa cars?
Yes.
I drove a
sloping roof. Yeah.
I drove a Crown conversion, which was converted it from a rear to a mid engine with a small block in it. And to this day, it was owned by a guy named Chuck Rust, I believe, down in LA. And I drove the car. And I was so blown away by how it felt like an American Boxster, Porsche Boxster.
Yep. Exactly.
It was brilliant. I mean, it was just what a brilliant machine that was.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's a whole community out there that does V8, there's V8 VARs, right? They do V8 mid-engine conversion on these cars, and they're fantastic. You know, they really are. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of engineering involved and a lot of, home building involved, but yeah, they can be made into quite the machine. So those are the two cars that I still have. I've sold everything off, kind of gotten down to pared down to that, and I'm paying attention to those. My poor Mustang is kind of like the girl next door, right? That you went away to college and you have all your flings and you come home, you look at the girl next door and go, man, she's still there. And she's kind of hot, right? And, that's been my poor Mustang. I've had all these other cars, and the Mustang, it hasn't had door panels on it in 30 years, right?
Right.
So, I mean, it's just been this neglected car, and I love it to death. And I finally said, I'm going to put some time and effort into that, drive it and experience that. And that's paid off in spades. It's a fantastic car. It's, like I said, not the sexiest thing in the world, not the rarest thing, not the fastest, and I don't care.
Yeah. And I think, to your point, when you've had a car for that long, I mean, the longest I've ever owned a car is my old Charger, my 68. And that car, I put 70,000 foot to the floor miles on, right? Just beating it to death for 20 years. And this was the year that, I spoke to my wife, spoke to Aisha, and I said, you know what? I think it's time we got to give this thing a little love. Right. Yeah. And that's what it's getting right now. It's for the first time in its lifetime, since I've owned it, it's getting air conditioning, it's getting new glass, it's getting a full refresh because it needs it. And I feel like like you said, we've had so many cars that have come in between that car, but that's the one that will always stay and the one that will never be sold. And it's like you got to look at it and go, you know what? You have been this rock in my life for so long. I got to throw you some love. Yeah. Because then you can enjoy it for another 20, 30 years or however long we're still around, Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I completely did the suspension on the car, changed its character, all the way around. It was, stock 65 Mustang, which is, barely a step above a Falcon in floaty and boatiness. Right. They're not really sporty cars. I threw a full coilover suspension at it, a 4-link rear end, the whole shebang. And my wife said, "You realize how much you're spending on this car?" I'm like, I don't care.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Doesn't matter. Never going to sell it. No big deal. Right.
Right.
So it's kind of fun to come back to that. Right. After having had all these weird and wacky, wonderful cars. But I'm always on the hunt. Right.
I know. That's the problem. Like we go, and I've said this many times, but I look at 300 to 500 cars a night at a minimum, right? Whether it's every auction site, every classified site, every site. I don't know. I'm not looking for anything in particular. I'm just looking, and it's just one of those things. And I'm a sucker for anything that's just, it doesn't even have to be good or desirable. It just has to be clean and well kept.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I ended up with my Caprice station wagon,
which we both had great. So this is another thing. Like I had a 92 Caprice wagon, which I kicked myself for selling. Alan had literally almost the same car.
Yeah.
Right.
We've had our car history is remarkably similar. We sat down and started talking with each other and go, "Oh yeah, I raced an Aprilia. Oh, so did I. Wait a minute.
Me too.
Here's a picture of my my B-body wagon. Oh wait, I've got one right now." Right? Yeah, it's really kind of spooky. But yeah, back in the day as entertainment, when newspapers and classifieds were still a thing, dating myself, I used to lay down every night and put the paper out on the floor and read the classifieds. And I stumbled across this ad for a Caprice wagon, right? And called up, and the price was low, and it was a brand new ad. And spoke to the gentleman and answered the phone. And he says, "Well, it was my mom's car, right? Mm-hmm. And she's passed away." And I'm like, "Oh boy, here we go. It's a little old lady car, right?" We've all heard that story. And I said, "Well, tell you what, I'll come by tomorrow and take a look at it."
Sure.
I get there, and this car is pristine, right? It is absolutely gorgeous. There is a homemade doily on the armrest.
Yeah, perfect. Right? Yeah, you have to buy it.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm beginning to believe you. He says she had it serviced down at the local Chevy dealership all the time. I said, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a test drive down to the dealership and I'm going to go ask them. He says, go right ahead. They'll recognize the car. I pull in, the service manager comes walking out and says, oh, where's Doris? And I'm like, got some bad news about Doris.
Yeah, sorry, man.
And he's like, well, this is Doris's car. She brought it in religiously. I'm like, sold, right? Buying this car, but always on the hunt for stuff like that, right?
Yeah, and it's becoming, it's hard now. I mean, the last year, prices of used cars because of part shortages and everything have gone through the roof.
Yeah.
And so now cars that used to be $2,500, $3,000 are now $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, right? People are just asking astronomical amounts. And the fact of the matter is, are they worth it? Well, no, really. Like, I'm not going to pay $9,000 for a 92 Caprice wagon.
Right.
But somebody is.
Somebody is. Right? Yeah. Well, and this has been it's come into focus for us right now because there's been a big jump, a big event and a big jump, right? But this has been a lament, for years. It's like, oh, I remember when you could buy a 250 GTO for
sure, of course,
right? Yeah. It's not a new story in the collector car world, but
it's just we're at that age now where we have those stories, and I'm like, son of a bitch.
Yeah, I had that car. Yeah, I had an 80s Bronco.
Yeah, we're that guy.
Yeah, we had a couple $1,000s, right? And now the good ones are going through the roof, right? So,
that's right.
yeah, it's a weird time. The market has definitely taken a pop up, right? And there are still some things out there like a Corvair that haven't taken a huge jump, right?
Right.
And they're kind of the oddball and the weird and the maybe the periphery of the collector cars or the hobbyist cars that are still fairly affordable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you go try to buy a Ferrari 458. Pre-COVID, those were 170,000,
right,
in that range. Now they're 250, right? Or
correct.
If you can get that, Corvair may have gone from 13,000 to 15,000. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I think you're absolutely right. In fact, I was talking to a friend of mine, my friend Rory, today, and he was telling me about a buddy of his that was first classic car. And it was it's like a 67 Deuce and a quarter, right? Old Buick. And I'm like, well, what's the price? And he said the car's in great shape. It's like $9,000. I'm like, that is such a perfect car to get into, like the Corvair is. You're not going to get that. You're not going to get hurt financially. You could literally drive it for the next 10 years, not lose a dime, right? You can introduce yourself to the collector car market in a way that is not only enjoyable, but will make you countless friends and connections. And it's a great way to get your feet wet. And you still have this wonderful piece of machinery that's going to stop traffic, that people are going to look at, they're going to comment on. And it's ultimately going to be such a wonderful addition to your life and whatever you do. And again, not that much money.
Yeah. And you could bring it to Concours de Limons too, right?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and even if it does go down in value, say it drops 10%, you're if it was a $9,000 car, you're out, $900. Where if you go buy a $300,000 car and it drops 10%,
that hurts.
That can hurt. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's ways out there, you see a lot of laments of, oh, it's gotten so expensive and it's priced the average guy out of the hobby. And it kind of hasn't,
right.
Do you have to shift? Yeah, you do have to shift your perception a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of fun to be had and a lot of community to be had, things like Cars and Coffee. Before that, if you had one of these periphery cars, your social circle was kind of small, maybe an owners club, right? But now with these open and inclusive events like Lemons, Cars and Coffee, these the Lemons rallies, you can there's a home for these cars. And, to everyone's credit, there are people that are just as interested in some of the weird and wacky cars as there are in the Ferrari Enzo. I'm with the California Automobile Museum here in Sacramento. I'm a board member there, and we have a running driving AMC Pacer. You want to stop traffic at Cars and Coffee,
right?
Take an AMC Pacer, right? I mean, you show up in oh look, another Ferrari, big deal.
Yeah, great.
Let's go look at the Pacer, right?
Right. So let me ask you, we're coming up on just around 45 minutes. What do you have on your list? Is there anything that because I have a few on my list, but what are you looking for? What do you like? You know what? I want to experience that at some point, right? Is there anything there?
I have, and this kind of falls in the weird and wonderful. I have a secret desire. It's kind of a guilty pleasure. I want a 1979 Lincoln
I know you
Bill
do.
Blass. It is the old money, the awful old money. It's the local country club. It's not the big country club, right? But it's a 400 cubic inch engine that puts out a whopping 170 horsepower. You know, it's 19 feet long. It's a
fabulous
two-door, right?
Right.
Just the, I have specific wants on this. It's got to have the white leather interior, right? So, and it has that Bill Blass blue and white nautical
fabulous look. That's right.
Oh, fantastic, right? And just, honestly, I think, and it's not an investment idea, but the personal luxury cars from the late 60s and 70s,
amazing.
Those are coming up. If you start to see, a Cadillac Eldorado or something like that, those are getting a little rarer, and
that's right.
Good versions of them are starting to cost more and more. Yeah. And it's like driving your living room. I mean, that's what
yeah. Anybody who's never driven those cars has no concept of how, like, if I go from SF, San Francisco, down to LA, I'm driving that.
Yeah.
Because I will tell you this right now. If you find one, and if you do, I will split that car with you if you want to. And I will say this out here because that's like, because we don't live that far from each other. We're about an hour.
Yeah. It's not something I need in my driveway every day. We can trade back and forth.
We can swap it. If you find one, I will say this right now, I will absolutely go halves with you on that car. No, like I would not even, like, if you were like, all right, dude, I found it, get on a plane, we're going to pick it up. I'd be like, all right, let me go to the bank. I'm in. I'm going to tell you that straight. I'm in. So,
well, all I have to tell you about that is my wife knows where you live. And
yes, she does.
And can probably take you. So yeah,
she probably can. Because it's funny. My wife always says, she's like, if it's a grandpa car, she's like, Mike's going to want it.
Yeah.
And that's just very true. And I think part of it is like, my grandfather, I grew up with him driving, all sorts of Cadillac Sevilles and Eldorados and stuff like that. Even my dad, when he was young, like he graduated into like, BMWs, like an M5 and other cars like that. But he also had old Buick Rivieras and LeSabres. And so I was kind of predisposed to being these kind of old man,
right,
Luxo barges from a young age. And I just remember them. I remember the wonderful, like, pillow top seats. I remember the big 8-tracks and all of those things where if you tried to do that today, people, like, if you presented a manufacturer with a pillow top seat, right, out of like a Bill Blass car, or they would look at you and be like, what are you doing?
It's a segment that doesn't exist anymore, right?
No.
I mean, short of like a Rolls Royce Wraith, right? I mean, that's probably as close as you come, and that's unobtainable, right?
Correct.
It is a bygone era. It is a bygone ethos, and a bygone, maybe even a bygone section of society that would have bought these things, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's interesting that way. And in a weird way, it's kind of classy, right? I mean, you show up in that, you park it in front of a nice restaurant, you're going to get parked right up front.
Dude, they're great. I mean, and when we talk about cars that we're looking for, like, I'd be all in on that. I'm looking for, and this is one that I always do, and this goes back to the Caprice wagons that we had, those long Peabody wagons. Right. But if I found not a Roadmaster wagon, because those have gone stratospheric, they're like 18, 20 grand, which boggles my mind. But like a super clean, low mileage LT1 Roadmaster, like the car, I would buy that tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I would be completely happy driving that for the next 5 years and be like, this thing is great.
They're fantastic cars. Yeah. Yeah. That, and I'm gonna go the other way as well. I kind of want, and this is just a personal thing, just because I've never had this. I want some stupid supercar, right? Just have it. And I know it leads to financial ruin, right? I mean, because the first time you got to change ceramic carbon fiber brakes, or it's it's expensive as hell. And if it breaks down, it's just awful. But, something in AMG GT, which is a phenomenal car, right?
Yeah. Just had a press one. Fantastic.
Yeah. Great cars. They're a little hard edge, but boy, they are a fighter jet, right? Just something stupid with a wing and a splitter and dive planes and a chrome wrap. Just, I mean, total, I don't even want to say the word, but total.
Yeah. Just
total,
ridiculous.
Yeah. YouTuber, doing donuts jerk, that I want that just for like a week. That's all I want it for. Right. And then go, okay, I got that out of my system. Right?
Yeah. And I think that's also, as an enthusiast, I think that's an important thing. And I think a lot of people think that they have to get into this hobby and whatever they buy, they have to keep.
Right.
You don't have to keep it. Like my goal is I want to own and experience as many cars as I possibly can before I die. Yeah. Right. And whether I keep the car for 6 months or whether I keep it for 2 years or 20 years, I want to own an experience. And like over the past, since I've been in California, this was very difficult to do in New York because of a lack of space. California is a lot easier. But I've gotten some dream cars. Like I always wanted a Porsche 928. Bought one of those. That was a rough one financially. Like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I don't care what anybody says. You can buy the best 928 in the world. Set aside from the day you buy it a budget of $15,000 to $20,000 that you're eventually going to put into it because you are.
Yeah. Yep.
You just are.
They're great cars though. I mean, looks, feel, drive.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. But I always wanted to own one and I bought it and I used it. I put 8,000 miles on it. I kept it for two and a half years, sold it. And am I upset that I did it? No, because to this day, still one of my favorite cars. Do I still want to own one? Absolutely not. Yeah. But I did. And I'm happy about that. So you should absolutely go do that.
Have I mentioned my wife can take you, right?
Yes, absolutely. But it's fine. Like it's fine. I live far enough away that I can get a head start in a fast car.
That's
so
probably true. Yeah. Well, she'd be coming in the supercar.
I know.
At a rapid pace. Yeah. Just drive it right through your front door.
I know. But I think I honestly think that's important. I really do. And if you can do it, I always tell everybody, you go around one time.
Go around once. It'd be fun to do. It's kind of like the Rolls Royce. Always wanted a Rolls Royce. Got it. It was a horrible experience, right? I mean, and there's going to be Rolls Royce owners that go, "Oh, they're the best car in the world." I understand that, right? Perhaps I had a bad one. Probably not, right? But yeah, just the experience of owning it, driving it. Being in that little fraternity for a while, and that's part of it, right?
Yeah.
Something like that would be fun. And honestly, there's a lot of really good sports cars out there for not a lot we right?
That's right.
Porsche Caymans are phenomenal car, Yeah.
Porsche Boxsters. We were talking about that where there are certain cars now that have been overlooked for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. People used to like poo-poo on the Boxster. It's a Porsche, so it's going to be brilliant. 2, it's mid-engine. 3, the chassis is out. Like you could pick a Boxster up 100+ mile, or 100,000 mile Boxster for like $8-9 grand.
Yeah.
And you know what? They're brilliant.
It's a phenomenal car. Yeah. Well, and there's the difference with if you're buying a car for yourself or for other people, right? You buy the supercar to show off to other people. You buy the Boxster because you want to get in it and, go out for the weekend, drive to the winery or, go canyon railing and have a great time doing it for not a lot of money. And who cares if anybody thinks you're rich or fancy or anything like that? It's the experience. And those are great cars for that. And again, not a lot of money. You can get a really good one for not a ton and have a great driving experience.
That's exactly right. Well, let me ask you this. So what do you got coming up? What shows do you have coming up? And then I want to go where everybody can find where you are, both online and everywhere else, to see what's going on.
Sure. This year is kind of a new, shifting gears for the Concours de Le Mans. We are now part of Haggerty's world of events that they're putting on, and our next event is going to be in conjunction with the Greenwich Concours in Greenwich, Connecticut, coming up in June. And there's Saturday and 2-day show. Saturday is going to be the Concours de Le Mans in Radwood at the location, and Sunday is the big Concours. We will also be at the Detroit Concours, which is used to be the Concours of America. And it's been renamed. We're moving it downtown to downtown Detroit, which will be a lot of fun. So Lemons will be there, and we'll be in August in California. And we're looking at adding a few shows as part of the relationship with Haggerty. We're looking for new venues, new events to tie in with, kind of using Lemons as part of Haggerty's ethos to save driving, right? To get people involved, and you don't have to. It's the same story. You don't have to be a billionaire, right? You can enjoy these fun cars for not a lot, and that's what we're using the show as a vehicle to promote. So,
and then where can they find your Instagram account if somebody wants to ask you questions about things? Where's the best way to get in touch with you?
Just ConcoursDesLemons.com. It's you can look it up if you Google Lemons Car Show, it'll pop up. And if you go to the website, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, where there's a YouTube channel as well. You look up any of those things, and my contact information will pop right up. We have a schedule on the website, and you can contact me directly, or just sign up, come to the shows, right? So
that's perfect, dude. Thank you so much for coming on. It's always good to see you. It's always good to talk to you. For somebody you've done so much in the industry and are literally a true asset, because I think you've helped kind of bring a lot of people, that you've opened the world, the automotive world, to a lot of people. And I don't think a lot of people could say that. So thank you.
I appreciate that. It's like I said, through no genius of my own, right? But that's just the way it worked out. And I'm glad it did, because that's part of this. This should be fun, right? It should be a good time. It should be about, putting smiles on people's faces, putting butts in the seats of cars, and having fun with them, no matter what it is. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that has been this episode of the Hot Rod BBQ podcast. Now, Alan and I spoke about a lot of cars that we love. Obviously, Hemmings, we've got the largest online classified section on the planet, plus our auction site. You want a car? Go to the Hemmings site, go to Hemmings.com, go to Hemmings Auctions, and buy your car there, because I know I have, too many times. But yeah, great resource. So, buddy, thank you for coming on. Always a pleasure. And I will talk to you very soon.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast and hit that subscribe button, and we'll come to you every week.